Well, at the risk of making this sound like an old boys reunion and reminiscing too much, I feel I must say a word or two about Bob Bernstein and Wei Zhisheng. First of all, in addition to being the CEO of a very large publishing house, and before Bob launched on the Helsinki Watch and the Human Rights Watch, he was very kindly extended his help and the facilities of his publishing house to a tiny magazine called Index on Censorship, which I started in 1972. And the other connection here is that I think we were the first, or if not the first, one of the first, to publish excerpts from the Fifth Modernization by Wei Zhisheng. So I felt a real connection in coming here today. And looking back, as Bob also did, I can see what an enormous road we've traveled in that 30-plus years. At the same time, sadly, we wouldn't be having events like this if we had traveled far enough. Thinking about this reading as I came, I tried to find a silver lining. And I must say that in 1978, Wei Zhisheng was a very lonely voice. I'm not going to say he was the only voice. We obviously didn't know very much about many of the other voices. And now when I look at this list of books that have been published, of Chinese writers that have been censored and repressed for their bravery for speaking out, I see that it's a much longer list. And I guess that in this, I take some hope and some thought that this list will get longer and longer until, hopefully, it's not needed at all. Gao Zhisheng is yet one more of these brave activists in China, a lawyer who has been kidnapped, arrested, and imprisoned repeatedly by the Chinese authorities and tortured, most recently on February the 4th, 2009, that is earlier this same year, when a dozen police officers came to his home and took him away. In December 2009, it says here, Gao's wife, Geng He, who was residing in the United States after leaving China with their daughter in early 2009, received information that Gao was held in detention in Beijing. In A China More Just, published in the United States in 2007, Gao chronicles his life and discusses his ordeals. We now have 3 excerpts from that book in 3 different voices, I would suggest. One is the voice of political rhetoric. The second is a personal memoirs voice about the sad stories that Gao has heard and seen. And the third is a kind of personal letter or address to the leaders of China. So the first excerpt goes as follows. China's leadership is making a fuss over the idea of, quote, building a harmonious society. Usually, whatever the authorities shout and make the most noise about is the thing that is in the most deplorable condition. While discovering deficiencies isn't a bad thing, given the values of our current leadership, the thought of them building a harmonious society is a foolish dream. Ours is a society without justice, a society with no ability to address injustice, a society that has systematically brought about a huge gap between rich and poor and between social strata, a society in which crooks control the corporate sector and knowingly exploit consumers while being protected by the system, a society without checks and balances other than by the people's pens, a society in which individual citizens' needs do not receive the attention and respect they deserve, a society in which individual citizens' needs do not, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, a society where the judicial system is unequivocally controlled by the Communist Party and the administrative authorities, a society where the power of the government is under the control of special interest groups and individuals, treated as a commodity and wielded on personal whims, a society that has a constitution but continuously shuns any notion of a constitutional government, and a society in which the whole nation looks at the government's handling of the Tiananmen massacre and the Falun Gong emotionally instead of rationally. Given all of this, isn't it beyond the capacity of any human being to build a harmonious society? This next excerpt is more personal. With a trembling heart and a trembling pen, I record the tragic experiences of those who have been persecuted in the last 6 years. Of all the true accounts of incredible violence that I have heard, of all the records of the government's inhuman torture of its own people, what has shaken me most is the routine practice on the part of the 610 office and of the police of assaulting women's genitals. Of those persecuted, also almost every man's and woman's genitals and every woman's breasts have been assaulted in a most vulgar fashion. Almost all of those persecuted, be they male or female, were stripped naked before being tortured. No words can describe our government's vulgarity and immorality. Who that can rightly be called a human being could possibly stay silent in the face of these facts? These experiences were related to me by a woman who spoke so rapidly she told the entire story almost in one breath. At 4:20 p.m. on October the 28th, 2005, Ms. Wang Shuhui and Mr. Liu Boyang, mother and son, were followed by Changchun City's 610 office personnel and illegally arrested. The two were brutally tortured by the police. By about 8 p.m., Liu Boyang, who was only 28, was dead. About 10 days later, his mother was also tortured to death. The bodies of the unfortunate pair are still in the hands of the 610 office. Liu's father scoured the city for a lawyer, but no one would dare take his case. He said, quote, "In this kind of society, it's harder to live than to die. Living brings more pain. And after I take care of their burials, I'll follow them and leave too." This last excerpt is in the form of an address or a letter to the Chinese leaders. Finally, with all due respect, I would like to say the following to my fellow countrymen Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao. You must summon the courage and moral strength to admit that every part of the political machinery used to torment our people over the past half-century is stained with the blood and tears of the innocent. You must summon the courage and moral strength to admit that there is no end in sight to the misery of the Chinese people, who have lived under oppression for thousands of years. You must summon the courage and moral strength to admit that our people have the right to pursue democracy, freedom, the rule of law, and human rights, and that this desire has never been as fervent as it is today. You must summon the courage and moral strength to admit that any attempt to obstruct people's pursuit of these rights in China today will be in vain. Pardon my frankness, but you cannot deny that the bloodshed our people have seen and experienced remain in their memories. Gentlemen, a word of advice. Only when we take the safety of our afflicted fellow citizens to heart may we be truly safe. Likewise, only when you genuinely care about our nation's future will you have a good future yourselves. May the new year bring Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao peace and good health. May the new year bring a world of difference to all my fellow Chinese. God bless the Chinese people. Your fellow citizen, Zhisheng.